Bonjour, je m'appelle Sarah Christine et je suis votre animatrice pour cette série de vidéos d'Action Canada sur les politiques publiques. Action Canada is a program for emerging leaders who care about public policy. These emerging leaders are from all across the country, all different backgrounds, and work in all different kinds of jobs. What they have in common is that they care about contributing to this country and doing so through public policy. Dans cette vidéo, nous allons explorer ce que le gouvernement fait et quel est le lien avec les politiques publiques. Governments do a lot, and different levels of government have different responsibilities. So here's a little bit of an overview. The federal government makes decisions and laws that impact all Canadians, like defense and citizenship. So for example, deciding who can become a Canadian citizen. The 10 provinces each have their own provincial government that make decisions and laws for people who live in their specific provinces on files like education and highways. So for example, deciding what is taught in school and what the speed limit is. The 3 territories also have their own territorial governments, which are like provincial governments, but with some differences. Municipal governments are in towns and cities, and they handle local laws and services, for example, the local public transportation system and garbage collection. Indigenous peoples also have their own governments for self-governance on their land. Maintenant, les fellows d'Action Canada vont vous donner plus de détails et des exemples des responsabilités des différents gouvernements.
For the federal government, and the federal government is responsible for issues of national concern. So you can think of the Constitution, it lays out some specific ones, areas like defense or trade, those sorts of things. But there's also shared levels of responsibility with the provinces and territories.
The government clearly is kind of the policy cover for the country. We work in all kinds of spaces. If you think about kind of the federal regulatory space and policy space, we regulate everything from explosives to air transport to the foods we eat. Of course, someone has to set the rule set for safe storage of explosives around the country. But we have expertise within the federal government that informs our regulatory thinking on this, informs how you build safety around explosives to ultimately keep Canadians safe, not just Canadians who are working in the explosives industry, but ultimately Canadians writ large, because explosives are out there. They are stored, and they're stored safely because of the good work that we do.
Le gouvernement provincial a beaucoup de responsabilités qui sont décrites dans la Constitution canadienne. Celles auxquelles on pense souvent, ce sont la santé et l'éducation. Donc, 2 très grandes responsabilités des gouvernements provinciaux. Et c'est des services vraiment que le gouvernement provincial doit organiser et donner à la population.
So a territorial government is much like a provincial government, where it offers services such as health, education, and even your driver's license. And so in that regard, it's quite similar to a province, but there is a distinction. The territories are much smaller in population, and because of that, have less of a tax base to support for those services that it provides. And so the territories are supported by the federal government, the Canadian government. And like Nunavut, for example, with 40,000 people, it needs that extra support. When it comes to providing northern specific services, because we do have issues and needs that are different than the rest of the provinces, we work on specific policies that best fit the territorial demand. One good example is when it comes to food security. In Nunavut, there's no roads that connect any other communities or the south, so everything is flown in or delivered by boat once a year. And so with that, there's added costs when it comes to having nutritious food such as fresh vegetables and fruits delivered to the grocery stores. And so having a nutrition policy is an important aspect for northern living and northern life.
Alors les villes ou les municipalités sont en charge de toutes sortes de choses proches des gens. Alors les rues, vos parcs, vos écoles sont tous des aspects qui sont gérés par vos villes, vos municipalités.
The role of municipal government is actually really interesting because it can depend by, like what province you're in. So in some provinces, municipalities have a lot of responsibilities, in other provinces they might have fewer responsibilities. But by and large, municipal government We do roads and bridges, we pick up your garbage, we clear snow off sidewalks and off streets. Police are a big part, public transit, so a lot of really important activities that impact people's day-to-day lives.
Apoyaki. I'm a member of the Blood Tribe from the Blackfoot Confederacy, which is part of Treaty 7 found in Alberta, Canada. With the Indian Act, it really did take complete control of the Indigenous peoples and bands, and there were a number of different amendments to the Indian Act, and so we are throughout the past century and a half seeing that tribes are taking more local control of their governments. And so specifically for my tribe, they have taken over a number of different local governments, and they provide different programs and services for our tribal members. So we have services like education, so at the K-12 and post-secondary, we have social welfare, taking a look after the welfare of children. There's also women's programs and healing programs as well for intergenerational trauma and addictions, economic development, land management, housing, to be able to house tribal members on reserve and off reserve.
Les différents paliers de gouvernement ont des responsabilités distinctes et la Constitution canadienne définit quel gouvernement a quel pouvoir. Ils ont aussi des responsabilités partagées. La réalité de la politique publique dans notre pays, c'est que souvent les différents paliers de gouvernement doivent travailler ensemble pour bien servir les Canadiens. Understanding which level of government does what helps citizens engage in the democracy and allows them to make informed decisions when it comes time to vote.